This is Mercury Control. Our tracking station on Canton Island reports contact with the Friendship 7 spacecraft at 12:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and our station on Hawaii reports contact at 12:39 Eastern Standard Time. We are continuing to analyze the difficulties with the attitude control system. The fact that the pilot is aboard and has the ability to analyze his problem and take judgmental, corrective action is a demonstration of the value of man in spaceflight. We will continue to analyze the progress of the flight and make our decisions timely enough to make sure that we fly the mission as best as possible. We have now had a summary status report from our flight controllers in Hawaii. He reports the astronaut's status was good. The status of the systems on board the spacecraft were good, except for the difficulties with the attitude control system. In a voice contact broadcast and relayed remotely to the control center, we heard astronaut John Glenn report that he is go for another orbit. Our analysis of the situation at this time is that we are in a go condition. Our flight director, Mr. Chris Kraft, has made a preliminary decision at this time that we are go and will continue the mission. This is Mercury Control with the Friendship 7 spacecraft approaching the west coast of the United States, coming around the tail end of his second orbit around the Earth. This is Mercury Control. The tracking and communications equipment here at Cape Canaveral made contact with the Friendship 7 spacecraft and astronaut John Glenn at 12:56 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Astronaut Alan Shepard, talking from here in the Mercury Control Center, carried on a conversation which began, "Good afternoon, 7," and then they worked out retro rocket firing times, clock changes, and other procedural matters. At 12:58 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, contact was made by the Bermuda station. Passing between Florida and Bermuda, John Glenn got a pretty good look at the state of Florida, and for that matter, at the whole southeastern United States. John said, "Have the Cape in sight, it looks real fine. I can see the whole state of Florida laid out like a map. I can still see clear back to the Mississippi Delta." The Friendship 7 spacecraft is approximately over Bermuda, or near Bermuda at this time, traveling down its third orbit around the Earth. Astronaut John Glenn still sounds good and is still working hard at his mission. This is Mercury Control.
All systems are still go. I have had some erratic ASCS operation. I caged and uncaged on the night side, and it appears to be working fairly well now, although I was drifting again in roll a moment ago. It appears to have corrected itself in roll, however, without me caging again now. Over.
Very good, John. We have go all the way on this. I might give you your inverted temperatures. Your fans are 215. Your ASCS 19.
The carrier Randolph's recovery area, it's about 225 miles northwest of San Juan, Puerto Rico. The carrier Randolph and two destroyers are patrolling an area at sea which is 200 miles long by 50 miles wide. These three ships are assisted by 12 long-range aircraft, 3 helicopters, and 27 other aircraft are being brought into orbital patterns, circular patterns, in the same area. That will make a total of 42 aircraft, any one of which can spot the parachute of the descending capsule when on the third orbit. John Glenn talking to Bermuda. He is now just entering his third orbit over the Indian Ocean.
Australia at 1:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Astronaut John Glenn is now in voice contact with astronaut Gordon Cooper at the tracking station. Just a couple of minutes ago, John called up Gordon Cooper and said, "Hey, Gordon, I want you to send a message for me. Send a message to the Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps that reads, have 4 hours required flight time. Request flight kit be prepared for me. Signed, John Glenn, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Marine Corps."
What is your opinion on the general problem, John? Well, I don't know. I want to start lining up just as carefully as I can here in a minute and see whether the Scanners will pick it up and correct it in, so we have a good retrofire attitude. If not, I'll line up myself, over. Did you have your 3-dog easy hotel times from Indian Ocean ship? Yes, I did. I got those okay. And I gave you a recommend change retro clock to 043237.
This is Mercury Control. The Mercury Tracking Station on Canton Island acquired the Friendship 7 spacecraft at 2:03 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The tracking station on Hawaii contacted the Friendship 7 spacecraft at 2:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As we from Australia toward Hawaii, we detected an indication of a problem with the heat shield deployment switch. A check was made over Hawaii, which confirmed that the system was operating properly and that the signal apparently was erroneous. He is also completing now his retro-firing checklist. And this is a process by which he makes sure that all of his onboard equipment is secured, that he has checked out his attitude control system, that he is in good condition and preparing to fire those retro rockets to begin that long landing flight toward the Atlantic. This is Mercury Control.
I'll give you some idea of where we are and what is going to happen. The Orbit 3 ballpark is a rectangle of the Caribbean that is about 200 miles long and 50 miles wide, slanting slightly southeastward above the coastlines of the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, about 150 to 200 miles north of those two islands. The carrier Randolph is located about in the center of this rectangle. About 40 miles on the Florida side of the carrier is the destroyer Stripling, and to the east of the command ship is the destroyer Noah. When Colonel Glenn's capsule splashes in, all three of these ships will race to be first on the spot. The basic plan calls for one of the destroyers to pick up the capsule after the astronaut leaves it and is picked up by helicopter. On the deck of the Randolph, the 3 helicopter recovery team under Marine Major Will Nelson will be checked out for the umpteenth time. This morning, an hour before the scheduled launch, the 3 Marine choppers flew off the Randolph for a final test hop. The recovery crews, including the Naval scuba divers, Bob Dixon and Bob Todd, the men who will make first personal contact with astronaut Glenn, then will drop from the recovery copter to affix the donut raft on the bottom of the Mercury capsule to give it greater stability.
We'll start the firing sequence on a corrected clock, the firing sequence of the retro rockets, which must slow down the space capsule so that gravity grabs it and pulls it back into your landing area 1,000 miles southeast of us here at Cape Canaveral.
And the first retro rocket should have been fired. 10 seconds apart. Glenn should have fired his second retro rocket at this moment.
These are small rockets in the base or the face of the capsule as it's flying, but they have tremendous effect and kick up there in space. We have to switch immediately to Colonel Powers at Spacecraft Control.
This is Mercury Control. Our California station has made contact with the Friendship 7 spacecraft at 2:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At 2:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the retro rocket firing sequence was initiated in the spacecraft. The retro firing attitude was assumed, and the 3 retro rockets have fired. They've been confirmed by the pilot and by our telemetry here in the Mercury Control Center. John Glenn's comment was it felt like he was going to send him clear back to Hawaii. The retro rockets have fired. The re-entry process will be initiated shortly. This is Mercury Control.
The next maneuver for the Friendship 7 is to point its blunt end of the bell-shaped spacecraft toward the Earth on the proper trajectory for re-entry. Now, if you recall, it was tilted slightly upward at retro fire. This will be the spacecraft's re-entry position so that the astronaut will have his back against the forces of re-entry, traveling backwards for the G-forces and the heat of the atmosphere. He reported the 3 retro kicks as being quite tremendous. This is the most critical and part of the entire flight. At this moment coming up.
That retro package has to be jettisoned before he comes into the atmosphere, too deep in the atmosphere, because it has to be off the capsule before he hits the Atlantic.
This is true before he can drop his blunt end, hit the blanket of atmosphere about 50 miles high. And he'll be slowing down quite a bit before then, but he's got to have that blunt end to take that 3,000 degrees temperature.
This is Mercury Control. The Friendship 7 spacecraft is approaching the coast of Florida at this time during his re-entry process. We have advised him that the weather in his landing area involves 1/10 cloud cover and 10 miles visibility. This should not present any hazard at all during the landing operation. He is now maintaining control of the spacecraft using the fly-by-wire system and the manual system as a backup. This is Mercury Control.
The NOAA does have the capsule in sight and is on its way.
The NOAA is equipped to pick up the capsule at sea and underway if necessary.
And if they recover Colonel Glenn, you'll get a welcome he's never had before. The competition on this force, as you know, has been terrific, and particularly as these...
John Glenn's capsule must be in the water by now, but NOAA is on its way. There must be aircraft overhead, and those helicopters will go off regardless, because the helicopters...
It's now developed that there is a race between the helicopters to get to Colonel Glenn and the destroyer NOAA.
If the helicopters get there first, it means Randolph, Red.
If necessary, they might throw ketchup bottles at the choppers. They have the honor to make this historic rescue. The NOAA would be about 20 to 30 miles straight ahead of us to the west, a little to the southwest. The ship is not in sight. It is impossible to see the capsule, and we did not see the drogue chute, nor did we see the main 63-foot capsule chute either. The reports coming into the ship.
That's about 30 minutes steaming for the NOAA.
Capsule is in sight. Is there any word, Lieutenant, of the astronaut's condition? The NOAA has the capsule in sight, is the only thing we've got. The NOAA has the capsule in sight. 55 miles from the Randolph. It is now 55 miles from the Randolph, and we will make then full steam toward that area, rendezvous with the helicopters, which would take us about what? About a half hour, I would think. Maybe an hour? In other words, this was
the race that Bill Downs was telling you about from the carrier Randolph means essentially this. The helicopters with faster flying speed can get to the capsule first and pick out John Glenn, pick out the astronaut himself, and just hold the capsule level and buoyant until the NOAA comes alongside with its recovery gear and the NOAA can pick up the capsule. This is Cape Canaveral.
USS NOAA indicates it is closing into the immediate vicinity of the spacecraft. We anticipate pickup shortly. This is Mercury Control. This is Mercury Control. The reports from the USS NOAA indicate the Friendship 7 spacecraft was picked up clear of the water at 1 minute after 3 and finally set down on the deck at 4 minutes after 3 this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. John Glenn reports, "My condition is excellent." They're in the process now of opening up the spacecraft to remove John Glenn from the spacecraft. This is Mercury Control. The spacecraft has been set on the deck of the USS NOAA. This is Mercury Control. A report from the USS NOAA downrange indicates Mercury astronaut John Glenn has left the Friendship 7 spacecraft. He is reported to be a hale and hearty astronaut after having successfully flown the United States' first manned orbital flight. U.S. astronaut John Glenn is on the deck of the USS NOAA, is reported to be a hale and hearty astronaut after his history-making flight. And this is Mercury Control.
Along with many millions of his fellow countrymen, President John Kennedy today watched and listened to the radio-TV coverage of Colonel Glenn's spaceflight. After seeing Colonel Glenn's parents on television, President Kennedy picked up the White House telephone and talked directly to astronaut Glenn, today's national hero, who had stepped on the deck of the destroyer NOAA just minutes before.
Hello, sir?
Colonel, we're really proud of you, and I must say you did a wonderful job.
Thanks, Mr. President.
Well, we're glad you get down in very good shape. I was just watching your father and mother on television, and they seemed very happy.
It was a wonderful trip. It's almost unbelievable to think back on it right now, but it was really tremendous.
Well, we're going to, we'll see you over at, I'm going to come down to Canaveral on Friday, and then hope you come up to Washington on Monday or Tuesday, and I'll look forward to seeing you there.
Fine, I'll certainly look forward to it.
And now we have Colonel John Glenn addressing the Congress of the United States.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of the Congress, I am only too aware of the tremendous honor that's being shown us at this joint meeting of the Congress today. When I think of past meetings that involved heads of state and equally notable persons, I can only say that I am most humble to know that you consider our efforts to even be in the same class. This has been a great experience for all of us on the program and for all Americans, I guess, too. And I'm certainly glad to see that pride in our country and its accomplishments are not a thing of the past. I know I still get a real hard-to-define feeling down inside when the flag goes by, and I know all of you do, too. As we rode up Pennsylvania Avenue today from the White House and saw this tremendous outpouring of feeling on the part of so many thousands of people, I got that same feeling all over again, and let's hope that none of us ever lose it. The flight of Friendship 7 on the 20th of February certainly involved more than one man just in the spacecraft in orbit. I can think of many people that were involved in this, but I can think of none more than just a few sitting in the front row right up here. I'd like to have them stand up. If my parents would stand up, please. My dad and mother. My wife's mother is there. I don't believe Dr. Castor is there right now, but Mrs. Castor. Is he? I guess Dr. Castor is up there in the third row up, I'm told here. There he is. My son and daughter, Dave and Lynn. And the real rock in our family, my wife, Annie. I'm real proud. In our flight in Friendship 7, many more things involved, too, as well as the people. There was the vision, of course, of Congress that established this national program of space exploration. Beyond that, many thousands of people were involved. Civilian contractors and subcontractors in many different fields, many elements, civilian, civil service, and military, all blending their efforts toward a common goal. To even attempt to give proper credit to all the individuals on this team effort would be impossible. But let me say that I have never seen a more sincere, dedicated, and hard-working group of people in my life. From the original vision of the Congress to consummation of this orbital flight has been just over 3 years. This in itself states eloquently the case for the hard work and devotion of the entire Mercury team. This has not been just another job to those of us on the project. It's been a dedicated labor such as I have not seen before. It has involved a crosscut of American endeavor with many different disciplines cooperating toward a common objective. Friendship 7, though, is just a beginning, a successful experiment. It is another plateau in our step-by-step program of increasingly ambitious flights. The earlier flights of Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom, who are over here, their efforts were stepping stones toward my flight in Friendship 7, and my flight in that spacecraft will in turn provide additional information for use in striving toward future flights that some of the other gentlemen you see here will take part in. This is Scott Carpenter here, who was my backup on this flight, Wally Schirra next to him, and Deke Slayton, and our one missing member who is still on his way back from Australia where he was on the tracking station, Gordon Cooper. A lot of direction is necessary for a project such as this, and the director of Project Mercury since its inception has been Dr. Robert Gilruth, who certainly deserves a hand here. Bob? I had planned to introduce Walt Williams. I don't see him right here. there he is, up in the corner. As well as being Associate Director of Project Mercury, Walt has the unenviable position of being the Operations Director. And he's the character, no matter how you look at him, who says hold the count occasionally and for weather and one thing and another. Well, with all the experience we have had so far, where does this leave us? We have, I guess, these are the building blocks of one much more ambitious and more productive portions of the program. As was to be expected, not everything worked perfectly on my flight. We may well need to make changes, but these will be tried out on subsequent 3-orbit flights later this year, to be followed by 18-orbit, 24-hour missions. Beyond that, we look forward at the moment to Project Gemini, a 2-man orbital vehicle with greatly increased capability for advanced experiments. There will be additional rendezvous experiments in space, technical and scientific observations, then Apollo orbital, circumlunar, and finally lunar landing flights. What did we learn from Friendship 7 flight that will help us attain these objectives? Some specific items have already been covered briefly in the news reports. And I think it is of more than passing interest to all of us that information attained from these flights is readily available to all nations of the world. The launch itself was conducted openly and with the news media representatives from around the world in attendance. Complete information on our project is released as it is evaluated and validated. This is certainly in sharp contrast with similar programs conducted elsewhere in the world and elevates the peaceful intent of our program. Data from the Friendship 7 flight are still being analyzed. Certainly much more information will be added to our storehouse of knowledge. But these things we know. The Mercury spacecraft and systems design concepts are sound and have now been verified during manned flight in space. We also proved that man can operate intelligently in space and can adapt rapidly to this new environment. Zero-G, or weightlessness, at least for this period of time that we're talking about, appears to be no problem. As a matter of fact, the lack of gravity is a rather fascinating thing. Objects in the cockpit can be parked in midair, for instance. For example, at one time during the flight, I was using a small handheld camera. Another system needed attention at that particular moment as I started to take a picture, so it seemed quite natural, and I had adapted to this rapidly enough that it seemed quite natural to park the camera here in the air, go ahead and do what I wanted, and then take up the camera again and go on about the business. It's a real fascinating field, needless to say. There seemed to be little sensation of speed, although the craft was traveling at about 5 miles per second, a speed that I too find very difficult to comprehend. In addition to closely monitoring onboard systems, we were able to make numerous outside observations. The view from that altitude defies description. I had listened earlier to Al and Gus both describe this and was eagerly looking forward to it, and in their wildest use of adjectives, they didn't describe what it's like even, nor can I describe it. The horizon colors are brilliant, and the sunsets are very spectacular. And it's hard to beat a day in which you're permitted the luxury of seeing 4 sunsets. I think after all of our talk about space, though, this morning coming up from Florida on the plane with President Kennedy, we had the opportunity to meet Mrs. Kennedy and Caroline before we took off. I think Caroline really cut us down to size and put us back in our proper position, though, when after being introduced she looked up and said, "Where's the monkey?" All this, and I didn't get a banana pellet on the whole ride. Seriously, though, I feel we're on the brink of an area of expansion of knowledge about ourselves and our surroundings that is beyond description or comprehension at this time. Our efforts today and what we've done so far are but small building blocks on a very huge pyramid to come. Questions are sometimes raised regarding the immediate payoffs from our efforts. What benefits are we gaining from the money spent? Well, the real benefits we probably cannot even detail. They're probably not even known to man today. But exploration and the pursuit of knowledge have always paid dividends in the long run, usually far greater than anything expected at the outset. Experimenters with common gray mold little dreamed of the effect their discovery of penicillin would have. The story has been told of Disraeli, Prime Minister of England at the time, visiting the laboratory of Faraday, one of the early experimenters with basic electrical principles. After viewing various demonstrations of electrical phenomena, Disraeli asked, "But of what possible use is it?" And Faraday replied, "Mr. Prime Minister, what good is a baby?" That is the stage of development in our program today, in its infancy. And it indicates a much broader potential impact, of course, than even the discovery of electricity did. We are just probing the surface of the greatest advancements in man's knowledge of his surroundings that has ever been made, I feel. There are benefits to science across the board. Any major effort such as this results in research by so many different specialties that it's hard to even envision the benefits that will accrue in many fields. Knowledge begets knowledge. The more I see, the more impressed I am not with how much we know, but with how tremendous the areas are that are as yet unexplored. Exploration, knowledge, and achievement are good only insofar as we apply them to our future actions. Progress never stops. We're now on the verge of a new era, I feel. Today, I know that I seem to be standing alone on this great platform, just as I seem to be alone in the cockpit of the Friendship 7 spacecraft. But I'm not. There were with me then and with me now thousands of Americans and many hundreds of citizens of many countries around the world who contributed to this truly international undertaking voluntarily and in a spirit of cooperation and understanding. On behalf of all those people, I would like to express my and their heartfelt thanks for the honors you have bestowed upon us here today. We are all proud to have been privileged to be part of this effort, to represent our country as we have. As our knowledge of this universe in which we live increases, may God grant us the wisdom and guidance to use it wisely. Thank you.